So Tanya, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You are a force. Actress, voice artist, writer, producer. Just really, it's just such a pleasure to have a chance to speak with you, to become familiar with your work. I'm excited about our conversation.
I'm excited too.
Great. You've created a dynamic one-woman show that explores identity, dominant beauty standards, assimilation, colorism, all through the lens of the Asian diaspora, which I actually found as an African American woman, there was so much in common.
Yes.
So these experiences, but okay, so let me say this also. It was really nice for me, and it showed me that I need to get outside of me more, to see the similarities that like what I maybe didn't even know a certain group of people are dealing with, which I know my group of people are dealing with, but we're all dealing with the same thing.
One of the coolest things about coming up with this show and putting it out there and people watching the show was, I realized something that I thought was so specific to my experience when I put it out there, and, so many people, across gender lines, across race, across so many different boxes we put ourselves in, right? They all came up to me and found something and that was similar in their experiences. So it's really like through examining our specific experiences, it really like illuminates this universal human experience that we all go through. And, it was just so fascinating to me because here I was, so shameful about my own experience. And I didn't realize the power of that story till I put it out there.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just been so illuminating and so empowering to put the show out there. It's just incredible.
So tell me a little bit about your upbringing and just how you got to where you are today.
Okay. So I grew up in Singapore, moved here as a transfer during college. So I came here to Cal State Long Beach. And one of the things I couldn't do was work outside of campus as a foreign student.
Okay.
But it so happened that KJAZ 88.1 FM was technically on campus grounds. So I had been in radio in Singapore. I had a top 40 show on a top 40 radio station. And so I took that demo tape, and I had also interned in Hawaii at KTUH 90.3. And I had the jazz show there for 3 months, and we were playing vinyl records and all that stuff. It was super cool. So I took references from there, took my demo tape and dropped it off at KJAZ 88.1 FM at Cal State Long Beach, the public radio station. And they called me up and said, do you want the Saturday night overnight show? And, me being in college and wanting to work, I was like, yes, I'm all in. So I did that for 3 years. And then someone from Apple heard me at 3 o'clock in the morning playing Jim Hall at 3 o'clock in the morning. He heard me and got in touch with me, and he wanted me to start this jazz podcast for iTunes at the time. And so, Apple had never done anything podcast back then. In fact, podcasting wasn't even that cool back then. But so I did 3 podcasts with Apple, and then, booked voiceover jobs here and there while I was doing all that. And, but there was always the acting aspect that I always wanted to get into. I've been in theater, but really wanted to get into television and film. Once my kids were a little bit older, more independent, I started getting out there more. And here I am putting out a solo show. I'm never one to sit around waiting for the phone to ring. So my solo show was a way of putting myself out there, casting myself in a role, showing people what I could do, casting directors, agents, trying to find an agent that sees my work and believes in my work to put me out there too.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons I put out a one-woman show.
Let me ask you this. Did you always know that your voice was, one could say, a gift or a tool that you were going to be able to use?
Oh, yes. I mean, growing up in Singapore, I knew I was going to do something with my voice. I maybe starting around 5, my parents put me in a speech and drama class in Singapore, and it was, British, right? Like we had British teachers, and so I would do monologues in a British accent and all this, and I just knew I could, like, accents were a thing for me. It was fun for me. And I used to help my friends, they would ask me to make prank calls to their crushes, and I would get on the phone and pretend to be someone. And, we would have a great time doing that. I would do radio dedications, to people's crushes or to teachers, or, just random stuff like that. Because in Singapore, I remember on Sunday mornings, Singapore media would buy these shows from America. So we had Rick Dees, Top 40. We had Casey Kasem. And I remember recording it, pretending to be like them and recording my own radio shows just for fun. And so that kind of translated to school, translated to me wanting to be in theater. But, coming from an Asian family, acting is not something you aspire to be or your parents encourage you to do. Right. And also in Singapore, there was no, like we had an English channel, Mandarin channel, Malay channel, and a Tamil channel, which is the Indian dialect, majority Indian dialect in Singapore. And there was no real future, right? Like there's, it's not like today where you can get discovered if you're in Singapore and you can come to America and audition for a show. Like, there was nothing like that. So I knew there was no future in it. But then when I moved, I didn't move here when I was 11. I stayed here for 3 months in Los Angeles with my aunt for 3 months after one of my big exams or something like that. So I had a 3-month break and I came here, stayed with her, and I would watch MTV incessantly. Like I was just, I want to be an MTV VJ. Right? That was my new thing I wanted to do. And there was MTV Asia, like they had different hubs across the world.
Yeah, I totally remember.
Oh yeah. And so that was the dream job at the time. So I was like, I could totally do this. I know I have the voice. I know I have the charisma. I just knew, like deep in my bones, I knew, like something like that would happen for me. But when I came back to Singapore and, looked up MTV Asia and who gets cast in it, it was kind of eye-opening because they were all models. They were all tall, I'm short, Eurasian, and fair. There was no dark-skinned Asian on MTV Asia. And then there was Casey Kasem's son, Mike Kasem, who actually lives in Singapore right now, as one of the hosts. Like, I think he was the darkest guy in that bevy of, beautiful people.
Right.
And that's when I realized, like, oh my God, like, all this is like impossible, and then I would start seeing it everywhere, right? English media in Singapore, where, if you're a minority, which were the Indians and the Malays, you got the, the supporting roles, but it was not meaty roles. You're the silly neighbor or the friend, right? There was nothing meaty about it.
Yeah, they're like the stereotype roles. So when you just went over that in your show, I thought of, same thing for African Americans. It's like the sassy friend, the neighbor, you know what I mean? Like you said, there's nothing meaty or fully developed.
3-dimensional.
Yeah, about the characters that were being played at the time. So yeah.
Right. You know what's interesting? When I was in Singapore, and again, we would have American TV shows, right? So there was Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And I remember a lot of my Indian friends and me, like we identified more with that than English TV in Singapore that had local characters, because we were like, whoa, like, America, like, they're actually casting Black roles,
Right.
and they're darker skin like we are, and
Right.
so it was interesting. Yeah. um
So on the flip side is here, we're like, oh, we have like one or two shows
right.
out of like all these other shows. So it's just like you said, it's fascinating depending upon which like perspective you're looking at it from, right? So
Exactly.
there you saw opportunity where an idea for African Americans, especially in entertainment, has been like one at a time.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I was watching this documentary recently on comedy, and they went through for like African American comics, it was like one per decade. And I'm like, and like I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's like Red Fox, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, and then things started to open up as you get a little bit closer to where we are now. But for such a long time, it was like, there's only room for one of you.
Right. And if you think about writers' rooms too, right?
Right.
There's always that one Black person or the one Asian, right? And then you start thinking there can only be one of us. And then there's competition within your own race.
Yep.
And it fosters all this, animosity when we should be like celebrating each other. And now, we're moving towards that now, but it's taken forever, And also, if you look at writers' rooms, if there are 5 Black people in a writer's room, each of them would have different experiences. It's like, 5 Indians in a room. I'm Catholic, so I don't have that Hindu background that other Indians do.
Right.
So we would all have different experiences.
Right.
And that's when 3-dimensional characters are possible, right? When you have that fullness of a writer's room.
Right.
And we've never had that as minorities.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's moving in a good direction. I don't know when it'll ever be perfect, but we're getting there.
Yeah, we definitely are. So talk to me about your creation process,
Yes.
the development process. So from like seed to fruit.
I want to say 10 years ago, this is before I had kids, I was in an acting class, and all my insecurities would show up in certain ways, right? Like, so if I'm doing a repetition with a partner and they would come to hug me or something, and I would do like, I would not want to be physically close with someone because I was not comfortable in my skin as a person. And so my acting teacher noticed this, and he said, and I explained to him, my background about growing up in Singapore and why I am the way I am. And he said, you know what, you should totally write about your cross-cultural experiences and put it on the Moth. And, he was like, I think people will love to hear about this. And so I did. Like, I went home, I wrote a page, and I hated every second of writing this page because I was in the thick of my insecurities. It was just, I just felt so stuck. Because I didn't have the kids. I hadn't moved on from my, like closed in feelings. Anyway, I wrote it, said it in class the next week, and I could not stand how people, like the people in my class, looked at me like in pity. Like they were like, oh, I'm so sorry. You had boobs at 8. Oh, you poor thing. You would have, you would have been a hit in America type thing, right? And I was like, ooh, it was just an icky feeling because there was no arc in the story. It was just like, this poor me. And, it was also shameful. Like, people are dying around the world, and I'm talking about my body image and how I don't feel secure in my own body type thing. So it was just so super shameful, right? And I didn't feel it was worthy to be told. So fast forward, I have the kids, And, my daughters had wavy curly hair. And here I was straightening my hair because I had always wanted to be like the people around me. And in Singapore, I studied Mandarin as a second language. So my classmates were all Chinese with beautiful, silky, straight hair. And here I am in Singapore, 85% humidity, where you can straighten however much you want. The minute you walk out that door, walk out of an air conditioning place, it just puffs out.
You were preaching to the choir in the show.
Yes. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So, I just internalized all these things about what I thought I needed to be, and what I thought I needed to be to fit in, right? Or what was beautiful.
Right.
Not necessarily the truth, but what I saw, as that 11-year-old kid. So anyway, kids were maybe 4 and 6, and I somehow stumbled across this solo writing class for one-person shows, and it was run by Jessica Lynn Johnson, who ended up being my director for the show. And she was holding this once a week free class in Sherman Oaks at the Whitefire Theater. Somehow stumbled upon it. I told my husband, "You've got the kids, Saturday morning. I'm going to do this for myself."
Right.
So I started going, never knew what my show would look like at any point during this time. Then the pandemic hit. And then here I am homeschooling my kids. And the best thing I did for my mental health was have a weekly class with Jessica. Right. Just to show her something weekly, right? And some weeks I would have one paragraph. Some weeks, like right before the class, I'll quickly write something, but I never knew where it was going. And, but slowly it formed into the show it is today. So that was the best thing I did for myself. And then of course came having a reading, right? I had to have a reading once the show formed, because you want to see how people react to it before you put it out on stage. And I had to have that courage to put it out there. So eventually did it, was through Zoom, because we're in the thick of the pandemic. And that's when everything changed for me, because here I was, I wanted to put something out there because I wanted to cast myself in something. I wanted to get an agent who would love my work, see what I can do. But once I had that reading and the comments I got from everybody, like, it was just mind-blowing to me. Everybody had the comment that this could help girls everywhere. Every single person, again, across gender lines, there were men telling me that, wow, when you start talking about your kids, like, I have a kid, and you would do anything for a child, and you also see yourself through your kids.
Right.
So many people came up to me to say, this needs to get out there. It's going to help someone. It's going to help that little girl that feels the same way you do, that feels that they have to fit in every which way they can just to be accepted. So that's when I realized, like, this is bigger than me. This is no longer just me doing it for a business reason, right? This is bigger than me. This is for someone who hasn't seen themselves anywhere. This is for someone who's hidden themselves, like the way I've always tried to hide myself. And yeah, in revealing so much of me, I hope it serves someone else now. And so, yeah, it's been an incredible journey. And, I started touring. I launched the show. I debuted the show during the pandemic. So we did it for Solo Fest, and there was no one in the theater, just a camera. We live streamed the entire thing. And so I had people from all over the world, my family in Singapore, people, some family in India, in Australia. It was super cool. And then I won Best of Fest. So did it again at the theater, live streamed it. And then for the first time with an audience, we did it at the Hollywood Fringe last year, and it won a couple of awards. And then the LA Women's Theater, Binge Fringe in Santa Monica. And yeah, about to start doing it in Simi Valley for the first time in Ventura County. And so, yeah, it's just been interesting to see where this is going to go.
So tell me about what you're going through internally as you have like each, I like to call them wins or like milestones, you know what I mean? Like what's going on with you, just like the courage is growing, like talk to me about that a little bit.
That's what the show is about too. It's like, it's my cross-cultural path towards self-worth. Right. Because, and it's through having my kids, it's realizing, because here I am seeing, and I saw it through my daughters too. It's like, they have that curly hair and here I am straightening my hair. Right. And I'm telling my daughters that they look beautiful, and they are beautiful. Their hair was beautiful. I literally thought their hair was beautiful, but I didn't want it. It looked good on you. I just don't want it. Right.
Right.
But my kids are seeing all this. Kids see everything. So here they are seeing me straighten their hair, and they're like, but I want to look like you. I want to look like my classmates, and I live in Thousand Oaks. Right. Where, their classmates are mostly white. We have Hispanics in the class, but, it's mostly white. They had straight, my daughter used to call it yellow hair. And she was like, I want hair like that. And I realized it's all because I wasn't accepting of myself. And so, through having my daughters, I attribute all my healing to having my two daughters, because seeing myself reflected in them, I was able to see what I didn't want them to go through. And I realized, like, self-love is everything. Right. It's like the best love story of all time, loving yourself. Because if you don't love yourself and accept yourself the way you are, versus having to change everything to fit into, whiteness, or fitting into all these boxes that people put us into, you have nothing. Right. It's like self-acceptance is everything.
It really is. And children are a sharp mirror.
Yes, they are. Right.
Like whatever you think you've been getting away with, no more.
Yeah, you're forced almost to confront all your insecurities. Every single thing you've been hiding and, sweeping under the rug.
Yes.
And, through the show, because I had to go back to the beginning of time of Tanya, I had to confront all those things that I was sweeping under the rug, or like, I used to have green contacts because I thought me being closer to whiteness was going to get me those jobs, like that MTV VJ job I always wanted. Right. It's that girl before the world told me who I needed to be, and I actually recently found that page that I wrote in that acting class. And wow, I looked at that piece of work and I just wanted to hug that Tanya, because I'm no longer that Tanya. That Tanya was so stuck, and I feel so bad for her. Like, I'm just so thankful, also finding my husband who, if you watch the show, you see what a role he played too, because he saw me for who I truly am, without the green contacts, without the straight hair. And he loved me for who I am. And, he gave me permission also to love myself.
Yes.
Yes. Because no one else had done that at that point. My parents, of course, say, you're beautiful, you're this, you're that, but they're my parents. And, my mom, who is, part Portuguese, Dutch, and Indian, because she grew up in India, in a British colony area, where there was a spice trade. So all the Portuguese and Dutch had come there. She's fair. And all my friends used to think like, oh, your mom's so beautiful. What happened to you? But that beauty was fairness, right? And she always told that to me too. Yes. Oh, it's only because I'm fairer than you. And so I always used to question, like, why? What is it about fairness? And that's when you go deep into it, oh man, colorism. And I think Alice Walker is the one who coined the term colorism. which is the discrimination of darker skin tone within your own community.
Within your own family.
Oh, yes. Mind-boggling, right?
From mother to daughter.
Yes. It is.
It's so deep. It's so deep. And it's interesting that you said what your husband did for you, because I identify with that completely, because it's someone who could choose something else, right? Like your parents, they pretty much, it's you and them. They're going to say what they need to say and whatever to try to build you up. But when you have a partner who could make other choices and they're saying like, you're beautiful, and they're saying you're beautiful while you're in the thick of feeling like you're not beautiful, and you're doing things to yourself. Because for me, it was straightening my hair. My husband was like, why are you putting chemicals? You have like, leave them on too long. There's burns. He, from the very beginning, he was like, you don't need to do that. And in my mind, I don't have anything else that I can do. I have to do this.
Yes.
This is what I have to, I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice in this. And then my mother had a very different texture of hair. She's very fair skinned, and she would make little comments like, oh, too bad, I have two sisters, too bad you guys didn't get the hair that I have, and you have the hair that your dad has, or your hair is more similar to your father. But so that's what I'm talking about. Like when it comes from within your own family, like your group is hard, your own family is just like, okay, where do I find my, like solid foundation? So our work is phenomenal, because it took me there, and like you said, it allowed me to say, Sidra, you've come a long way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also through writing the show, it made me realize, it really isn't our parents' fault. Like your mom saying all that.
It's not her fault. Like,
it's generational trauma.
Yep.
It's like, it's passed down, and they don't really know what it's doing to you. Right? Like my parents till today, if they come visit, like, get out of the sun, like, it's so ingrained in them. They don't mean it to hurt you.
No,
because it's been in their blood that the darker you are, the lesser opportunities you have. It means you're poorer. It means and they're not thinking that way. It's within them, because they've lived that, and their parents have lived that. And
another thing I thought of, and this is we're going kind of personal, but this is through therapy I came to this, was in talking about colorism. It was also, and this could be, I'm going to say what it was from my vantage point, but this could apply to other groups. For us, it's like, it's also, like you said, it's safety, right? Like here, there was so much violence and brutality towards African Americans. So it's like the closer you look to not looking, the safer you can potentially be. And that's done out of love. I want to keep you safe, right?
Right. Yeah.
When I kind of even just came to that realization, I was like, this is so just enormous and has so many layers to it.
Right.
So many layers to it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Also, because, and I read the book while I was in the thick of the show too, and I forget the name of the book, but it was about passing. It's about two African-American girls. One sister was lighter than the other, and she was passing as white. Yeah. We're at a moment in time where people are listening deeply to stories, which is why this is a prime time to tell all our stories. You know, you can never live in someone's life, but like walking alongside them, just like me reading that book about passing, it's like I walked alongside as I'm reading this book, and man, like the emotions, and it also brought up feelings that I had growing up, where whitening creams that you only find in Asia, like what? L'Oreal, like this huge company, you don't even, and I was putting that on here, like I bought product to bring here because I knew you couldn't find it here.
Right.
Oh. And I'm so thankful that I have moved past that. Like I am so almost sick thinking about how I had to be. And it's like you were saying, it's like you're doing this as a kindness to the world. It's not because someone told you to or anything. It's like you have to do, like something that you as your own person has to do in order to even be.
Right.
And that's the sad part, it's like, man, yeah, it is truly a journey to accept yourself the way you are and boldly declare it to the world.
Right.
And so this story is a gift to myself, and also in releasing it, I hope it's a gift to someone else. And I think that's the only way we can move forward. And also through the show, it's a 3-dimensional character because my past, my present, and hopefully my future. And that's when a full person. And that's what I'm hoping to portray, to acknowledge that representation really does matter. Because when you don't have those 3-dimensional characters in shows, like how are you supposed to know anything about a person?
Right.
And that's when we have wrong ideas about different races, and caricatures happen because there are no 3-dimensional characters.
Right.
It's starting to happen, and I hope it continues.
Right. What did you feel like you discovered about yourself as an artist? Like just, I guess, in the actual nuts and bolts of putting together the show. Talk to me a little bit about what that is, to just like the nuts and bolts of a one-woman show.
Why it was so hard to have that courage to even do the reading at that point is because no one really talked. It's easy to talk about, outside communities doing something to your community, and then you talk about it, right? But when it's within your own community, it's like, what is it called? It's horizontal discrimination. That's when it's tough to talk about it, because, I want to celebrate my culture, but how do we do that when we need to talk about all these things first? And I was nervous to talk about it, but my favorite vehicle to do that through is through characters. Because that's what acting is about. You're able to take on a character, break it open, find all these nuances in things through character. And so my character, Porcelain Skin, that was my way of being able to talk about colorism. It's like, here you're coming from a point of porcelain skin, like, hey, this is the highest standard of beauty.
Right.
It's one of the biggest growing industries in the world, believe it or not. And I was able to have that courage to talk about these very contentious topics that, that I thought was contentious. And I was afraid to talk about as Tanya. But when you do it through character, you're able to break it down further. You're able to explore it more. And that's what being an actor is. It's taking all these human experiences and, laying it out there for the audience. And I was able to do that through characters. And that's why using these 35 characters to tell my story was so empowering. And, it gave me so much courage. Because, and I had that drag queen character, which was the perfect vehicle to tell the background of Singapore. There's so much that no one knows about Singapore, right? Like I have so much context for America, with all the American TV shows that Singapore media would buy.
Right.
Right. But America has no context for a lot of countries.
I had no idea. I had to look up Singlish.
Yes.
And I was like, when I saw it to the patois, I was like, okay, I was only identifying patois with like I have Jamaican ancestry, or like I didn't even know that throughout the world, I had just had this limited kind of idea of a language, or a patois that is being used. So just in that, I was like, okay, there's a lot I don't know.
So yeah, it's giving voice to all those nuances of identity, of beauty, how every country is so different, right? So characters was one of the big things that I've realized can bring voice to so much. You can talk so much through characters and gain so much courage from that.
Yes.
Thank
you so much for believing in yourself and putting yourself out there, and then finding that like we're all here waiting for you once you put yourself out there, because we're like, yep, me too. And how do we know that, right? Like, unless someone is brave and puts themselves out there. So I really appreciate your work. I'm really excited to see where you go. And I think it's going to be very far. Like I said, you're a force. You are definitely a force. So thank you for your time. I know you're super busy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.